Those within the community continue to speak out and organize, spreading the latest through updates on Twitter and Facebook. And are they succeeding in making this case go viral? To talk about the online efforts, Lori Harfiness joins me now from New York. Hi there, Lori. So I want to ask you, how has social media helped to get this story out?
Yeah, so I live in Brooklyn, not too far away from this. I was sitting on my couch when things started to really escalate, and I had no idea that anything was going on except when I checked my Twitter feed, and it was just blowing up about Brooklyn, and I was like, what's going on? So they were the first to tell me about it, and I live, not too far away, about a mile away. And people were tweeting videos, and they were tweeting what was going on, and the mainstream media was absolutely silent on it. So that's where I was getting all the information.
Yeah, we have some tweets here. I wanted to read them, if we can put them up there. Occupy Theory says, hashtag NYPD declared a portion of Flatbush a frozen zone, i.e. media are not allowed in and people can be subjected to arrest. And that has the hashtag Brooklyn protest. Another one there, media reporting on new Pope for 20 straight hours while helicopters and riot gear are deployed on the streets of New York. And the last one we have there from Occupy Wall Street, New York. Brooklyn took to the streets for the third straight night. When will we be heard? So, Lori, do you think you had mentioned that mainstream coverage of this story is scarce, and it appears to be a pretty big story. Somebody was shot and killed, 46 people arrested. So do you think people kind of maybe feel like they're being ignored and social media is the way to get this story out?
Yeah, well, especially when you have a kid that dies. It's such a tragedy. It's so awful. When you have a 16-year-old that dies in your community, you want the world to know. You want everyone to know that this tragedy happened. You want the facts out there. And so, of course, the community feels like they're being jilted by the mainstream media. So I think more and more people are realizing that, it's a grassroots effort. If you really want to get the word out, if you want to mobilize people and get the word out, then mainstream media is not the place to go. They don't expect them to show up. Do it yourself through social media.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting. I know that this has been covered locally, but for one reason or another, it hasn't been covered on a national scale. I want to ask you, does this kind of signify, this one incident kind of signify an underlying tension that was already there, that already existed between the police and the local community? Is this story deeper than the shooting?
Yeah, and I think that it feeds into why the mainstream media might not be covering it, right? Because the story isn't that sensational. It's the cops versus teens that are running around with or without guns, but it's a story that we hear across the country. It doesn't have that juice that the mainstream media wants, so that's why they're not covering it. And yet, it is a typical story. It's been happening over and over and over again. So yes, it definitely signifies a bigger problem, a bigger issue. And to me, when I see this happening so often, and I know a lot of police officers personally, and I've been assisted by a lot of NYPD officers, I'm not going to sit here and say that all NYPD is bad. There are good cops and there are bad cops. But clearly something is going on between cops and citizens that they're supposed to protect. And no one is analyzing, where is this war being fabricated from? Why are we going at each other's throats when none of us are rich? The cops aren't rich. We're not rich. Why are we fighting with each other? And that story is clearly being ignored.
All right. It's interesting because this story isn't really getting much mainstream national press, at least. But we see stories like Trayvon Martin. For some reason, that story blew up. Do you have any idea, Lori, why that is?
Yeah, well, that had stand your ground, right? That had like a little bit of a hook that national media could get into, and you could explain it all, and it had the sensationalism. This is just, a city kid had a gun and got shot, and that happens so often, I think that mainstream media is ignoring it because it's like, well, where's the sensationalism there? It's an everyday situation, and we're just gonna, ignore it. But it's unfortunate because these kinds of things should be brought up. Why do 16-year-olds have guns? And why are the cops afraid of us? And why are we afraid of the cops? There's all these questions out there that are just being ignored.
I think what makes this story unique is the backlash that we're seeing and the ensuing the riots and dozens of people getting arrested. Lori, you said that you lived in Brooklyn and you've kind of been seeing this go on firsthand. What do you think it will take for, it's been 3 straight nights now, for the riots to end and for the community to come back to some kind of normalcy?
Honestly, I don't know. I think that, there's a lot of people right now that like to jump on the screw the cops bandwagon. And so because there are cops involved, there's a lot of people from outside of the community that are coming there to riot, to do things that have nothing to do with getting the word out about this poor child that was killed. And that, unfortunately, is leading to this violence and, people knocking over stores and all this horrible stuff that really just muddies the issue. So, I don't know what's gonna, I don't think it's just gonna peter out and be one of those really unfortunate untold stories. And it's totally a travesty.
Yeah, I guess we're gonna have to wait and see how it does play out. But Lori, I appreciate you weighing in. That was Lori Harfinis from theresident.net.